Okay, so Shalom Ubracha, welcome back. We're continuing with the discourse that we left off a long time already. It's been half a year. Birkat Hoda'ah Vav, which is also on lesson 24, Likutey. And in it, Rav Nosson is dissecting the parshas dealing with the story of Yaakov. And he's holding here in Parshat Vayshlach, where Yaakov is fighting the angel of Esav. So Rav Nosson earlier explains the whole battle between Yaakov and the angel of Esav, and that it says that they were rising dust up to the heavens. They were wrestling each other, wrestling, and there was avak. So Nosson explains that the idea of dust connotes sadness and depression, because when a person has sadness and depression, there's a lot of what's called lethargy, lack of movement, and lack of movement accumulates dust. You have a house you leave untouched, okay, you don't clean it up, nothing, so dust accumulates. So to a person who's sad and depressed, it's considered he's getting dusty. Besides rusty, he's also getting dusty, right? And that's the idea of avak. And Rav Nosson explains the whole thing that the angel was trying to accomplish was to throw Yaakov into sadness and depression. That was why he was wrestling with him, with the avak, because Rashi says there on the word avak a few explanations. One is that they were like tangling into each other in order to bring down one another. That's avak ish imo. Avak meaning like he was twister, okay? But also avak means the dust, like we said. Why all this? Because the angel of Esav was trying to throw down Yaakov into sadness and depression. So then it says, Vayar ki lo echolo. The angel saw that he couldn't bring him down. So what did he do? He hit him on his hip by the sciatic nerve, the Gida Nashe. He got the sciatic nerve to move from its spot on the hip, on the waist on the hip, where you have there the white part of the bone of the hip, and the sciatic nerve is covering a part of it. So he was able to get it moved from its spot. That's the pshat, the simple meaning of what happened. Rav Nosson now is going to show us what is the deeper meaning behind this. What does it really mean to us? In other words, what was going on here? So he says like this, Rav Nosson. First, originally, the angel saw that Yaakov, he couldn't bring down Yaakov. What does that mean, he couldn't bring down Yaakov? Yaakov himself, as much as he suffered so much with Esav, with Lavan, with all the tragedies that he had suffering, okay? And there's yet more to come with Dinah and Yosef and Binyamin and everything. Yaakov was able to maintain an inner sense of simcha and hope and persistency to keep on going forward and not to be broken. And when the angel saw that he can't get to Yaakov, so he's trying to find an opening where to cause damage. Okay? So he did find an opening to cause damage. And this is what Rav Nosson is addressing right now. So Rav Nosson says like this. We're in paragraph 25 of discourse number 6. Again, like 6 paragraphs within. Halfway within. Aval ba'avonotenu harabim. But unfortunately, due to our many sins, hitgaber, the angel of Esav was able to overpower. And it says in the verse, Vayiga bechaf yerecho, right? This is the verse. This is Parshat Vayshlach. I have it over here, right? It's chapter 32, verse 26, right? The verse reads, Vayar ki lo yacholo. So the angel saw that he couldn't bring down Yaakov. Lo yacholo, he couldn't mess with Yaakov. Vayiga bechaf yerecho. So he hit, ligat. He was able to penetrate the kaf yerecho. It's like a spoon. It's like a spoon in a container. That's how the shaping of the leg, the upper part of the thigh, fitting into the waist bone, the area of the waist bone. So it's called the kaf of the yerech, because it's like a kaf, like a spoon that you mix a soup with. It's shaped like the type of a spoon, like a ladle, the top part of the bone. So that's where he was able to get him, in between the waist and the bone. That's where the kaf is. So he was able to get him over there. Okay? We'll continue the rest of the verse. See how Rav Nosson explains the rest of the verse, B'ezrat Hashem. But in the meantime, let's just continue here. So, he says, Vayiga bekaf yerecho. Okay, Ve'ita. Now it's brought down in the Midrash. Midrash Rabbah. Bereshit Rabbah, chapter 77, section, paragraph number 3. It says something very interesting. What is the symbolism of Yaakov's thigh and the hitting of the sciatic nerve over there? Because everything happening to Yaakov, like Rashi says a few places, is symbolic to us, the Jewish people. It's symbolic to what we're going to be going through. So there's a symbolism in the angel of Esav hitting Yaakov. What is that? So Rav Nosson's quoting the Midrash. The Midrash says, we'll see it inside also, Shenaga bebanav ubadorot ha'achronim. The idea of Yaakov's thigh, which is the upper part of the legs, it's part of the legs, is basically representing the offspring, the descendants, the children and the future descendants of Yaakov. So the idea is that the angel of Esav saw, I can't attack Yaakov with sadness and depression, which is the idea of avak, the dust. So where's the opening? The opening is in his descendants. I found an opening to bring them down. Look at the wording of the Midrash. We see Rav Nosson summarizes the Midrash in just like one word. But the Midrash says like this. It says, Vayiga bechaf yerecho. The angel hit the thigh bone, the upper thigh bone of Yaakov. Naga batzadikim ubatzadikot baneviim ubaneviot shehen atidin la'amod mimenu ve'eze ze doro shel shmad. That he hit the future tzadikim and tzadkanias and prophets and prophetesses that will be coming, descending from Yaakov. That's the idea of the leg, and that's the generation of shmad. In other words, the generation of destroying the Jewish people for their Judaism. That's what the pshat is of the Midrash, okay? And then the Midrash goes on, three rabbis try to explain how did the angel hit Yaakov, and the how represents what type of specific suffering that he indicted into the Jewish descendants of Yaakov Avinu. So vateka, the word, because the word uses vateka, it goes on, right? If you take a look at the rest of the verse, so it says first in the verse, right? Vayiga bechaf yerecho. So the angel hit naga. He made a nega, like a pigia, like an attack on the kaf yerech, the thigh bone, which is the sciatic nerve. Vateka kaf yerech Yaakov be'aveko imo, and was able to letakea, means to move it from its place. So he hit him in the kaf yerech, causing that it was teka. Teka means it was removed from its spot, the kaf yerech of Yaakov. And the Midrash points out, I know it's Yaakov. So why does the verse have to say, Vateka kaf yerech Yaakov? Just say, Vateka kaf yerecho. And he moved the bone, his kaf of the yerech. Why does the verse have to say again Yaakov? I know we're talking about Yaakov already. So from there they learn that the yerech Yaakov means the descendants of Yaakov, not Yaakov himself, but his extension, which are his descendants. That's why it says the kaf yerech of Yaakov. Even though I know already it's the kaf yerech of Yaakov, you don't have to say it, but by saying it again, it's like indicating someone, a group who are called the kaf yerech of Yaakov. Who are they? The descendants. Which descendants? The tzaddikim were going to suffer. The future good people, the Jewish people, were going to suffer at the hands of Esav, of Shmad. That's where the angel was able to get in. Okay, be'aveko imo, in his attempt to raise avak, or to wrestle him down for the sake of avak, which means sadness. Okay, so look how Rav Nosson's opening it up. First of all, the Midrash goes on these words: Vateka chaf yerech Yaakov. Three rabbis: Rabbi Berechia, Rabbi Eliezer. Sorry, two rabbis: Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Berecha, Rabbi Eliezer. Two opinions. Rabbi Eliezer amar she'aya. What does it mean she'aya? That he made it chalak, smoothed it. He hit it, so it pushed back in. Because normally this bone, when a person is very skinny, chas v'shalom, like in the concentration camps, so you see the bone sticking out. So technically it is sticking out, but the angel pushed it back in. Okay? And and that hints to what type of suffering for the future. Ramaz litziat Yisrael chalakim unekiyim mechusham. The idea of chalak, you put something in and it's like smooth, that the Jews will be smoothed out from their parnasa. They'll have nothing, no riches, nothing, because the Esav will take everything from the Jews, leaving them like chalak. Chalak means smooth. No money, no nothing. That's the idea of she'iyah, chalak. Because the descendants of Esav will always be, plotting to steal from the Jewish people. Rabbi Berechia says in the Shem Rabasi, Sidka, he made a crack, like the way you crack open a fish from the length, not from the width. A fish is long, so when you want to open up a fish to take out the bones, so you do a sedek. So sidka, like a kedag, he says, like a fish. Right? Shesotkim oto leorko. And this hints to the makot, that they'll be physically hit and injured with sedekim and cracks, and being, crack the Jewish people from the hands of Esav, from the physical attacks of the pogroms, etc. Okay? And here's the third opinion, right? So Rav Nachman bar Yaakov says, Persha mimekoma, he moved it from its place, shekvua bo b'sheka shebe'etzem agana yerachim, okay? Vehu makat neka, makat asart etzem mekoma. And this, like the actual explanation that we use, that it moved from its place. But that's how it explains what teka means. They want to explain, yes, it was moved, but there was also other damage. There was Rabbi Berecha, Rabbi Eliezer, but Rav Nachman bar Yaakov says it's clear that it's moved from its place. And what's the hint here? To remove the Jews from their faith. That's the idea of moving the sciatic nerve, having the nerve moved, and the makkah hitting, causing a movement from its actual place, which is the idea of moving the Jews from their actual place in believing in Hashem, and getting them chas v'shalom not to believe in Hashem. And that's what's actually happened in this last 200 years of the exile of Esav. How the Jewish people, the majority of Jewish people, are not religious. They don't know anything about Hashem. There's no connection. So this is like what Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak said. All three have happened to us, though. All three opinions. Okay. So this is how the Midrash is explained. Okay. And Rav Nosson says, but the bottom line of what the Midrash says originally about Shmad, about Rabbi Berechia, it's referring to the descendants, the damage caused to the descendants. So Rav Nosson is focusing on that idea, the descendants of Yaakov. What's the idea? So he says, Shenaga bebanav ubadorot ha'achronim, that the angel hit in the sons and descendants, the later descendants of Yaakov, shehem bechinat vaglim, they are represented in the legs, because just like the legs are the end of the body, the top of the body is the head, the end are the feet, so too the top of Yaakov, the beginning of Yaakov is his head, and the end of Yaakov's physical symbolism of his body are his final descendants, us. Okay? So we are the legs of Yaakov. That's where the angel saw an opening in the leg area. He found a specific place in the leg area, though. The legs, Rav Nosson wants to focus on. Bechinat ikvot meshicha. You see, a term for legs is given to the footsteps of Mashiach. Ikvot meshicha shebahem naga. The legs is where you have the feet, and in terminology of the history of the Jews and the placement of where we're holding, we're called the dor ikveta dimshicha. Ikveta, ekev, like this week's parsha. Ekev means the heels. We're at the feet right before the coming of Mashiach. It's like the end. So that's where the angel decided to attack. His opening is the feet, but like the feet representing like the end of the Jewish people, the last descendants of the Jewish people. Shebahem naga, that's where he hit. So he explains, Ki ikar hitgabutam hu bivchinat vaglim. The main place where the Yetzirah attacks is not by the big tzaddikim and the earlier generations. The main place of the attack of the Yetzirah is in the place of the feet, the people who symbolize the feet, which is us. Shesham achizat klipot, because it's by the feet. Feet on one hand symbolize the end. So the end of Yaakov is the future descendants of Yaakov, but also feet being in such close proximity to the earth, and the earth being considered a place where you have the domain of impurity. That's the idea of the earth. That's why we bury a human body in the earth, and the earth becomes impure because of the body in there, because that's a place of impurity to accept even more impurity. That's the idea of the earth. So because the feet are walking on the earth, and they're in close proximity to the earth, so they're in close proximity to the klipot, because the domain of the klipot is considered by the feet. You know, the Ben Ish Chai says something amazing. He says, normally when a Jew wakes up in the morning, like in the Beit HaMikdash, they should be washing their hands and their feet together. The Kohanim, before they started the service in the temple, they'd wash their hands and feet, right? They would put one hand and one foot and wash together, and then one hand and other foot and wash together. They would wash the hands and the feet together to remove the impurity of the hand and the feet. So the Ben Ish Chai asks, how come we don't do that today? Why don't we wash our feet also? It makes more sense to wash also the feet. You're washing the hands, which are higher. The hands are at a higher level. It's true you do things with the hands. Okay, it's understood. But the feet are considered more impure, because that's loneliness. The feet are physically more sweaty and dirty, number one. But number two, the proximity of the impurity of the feet to the domain of impurity makes more sense being impure than the hands. So why don't we wash the feet also? So he says, the Ben Ish Chai, the feet are so impure today that water doesn't have enough koach and strength today to wash off the impurity of the feet. That's why we don't wash the feet. We should, but it doesn't do anything. It does nothing. So that's why we don't wash our feet at all. We wash our hands because there we have room to remove the impurity by negel wasser in the morning, etc. But by the feet, there's nothing to remove, because they're they're in such close proximity to the domain of the klipot. Today, until we have the red heifer, we can't purify them. So there's nothing to do about the feet. But the hands we can, and that's what we do every morning, to some degree. Okay? So again, he says like this: it's like a rule. The main power of the evil overpowering us is in the domain of the feet. Shesham achizat haklipot, that it's by the feet is the stronghold of the evil forces, the husks. Shema atzvut, that they, like we said many times in this lesson 24, Likutey, the klipot represent sadness. He says it clearly, Rabbi Nachman, in lesson 24, that sadness and depression are the epitome of the evil forces. The gateway for evil forces to attack is through sadness and depression. That's why the best way for evil to get people is through sadness and depression. That's the opening to bring them down and to attack them and to steal the any holy nourishment they have, to steal it from them, from through the opening of sadness and depression. And that's what the angel was trying to do, to get an opening to attack. And that's why he hit Yaakov by the leg area. So this idea, Rav Nosson first wants to show you a verse that expresses this idea that the feet are accessibility to the domain of evil forces and death. So watch, he says like this. This sadness is the side of death. Okay? That we know. All these are connected. Evil forces, sadness and depression, the side of death, they're all synonymous. They all work together. They're all in the same ballgame. Okay? Bechinat, like the verse reads. It's a verse from Proverbs, Mishlei. Ragleha yordot mavet. Let's take a look at the verse. This is Proverbs, chapter 5, verse 5. Right? Ragleha yordot mavet, sorry. Her legs descend to death. King Solomon is giving an analogy of heretical ideas, philosophical impure ideas, thoughts of idolatry, as a dangerous woman. And so don't get enticed to enter the domain of philosophy, to enter the domain of impurity, because once you enter, you should know you're in for it. Ragleha yordot mavet, her legs descend to death. Just like, unfortunately, a physical woman, there's a, God forbid, a lady who's a zona, like a prostitute, whatever. So having relations with her and giving the holy seed of a Jew into such an impure area, it causes a person to descend to the domain, the valley of death, the domain of death. That's on a physical level. And King Solomon has used that as an analogy, that also when you entertain negative skeptical thoughts of atheism, of heresy, or foreign ideologies, especially entering the world of sadness and depression because of getting stuck with such philosophical questions and confusions and convolutions. So the King Solomon says, by entering that domain, you now are falling low. Ragleha yordot mavet. Her legs descend to death. Don't start with the wayward woman who's referring to the idea of philosophy and foreign ideology and sadness, all that, because it's going to lead you to death. So Rav Nosson is pointing out, Ragleha yordot mavet. Her legs descend to death. Why mentioning that? Because, like we said, the area of the legs is in close proximity to death. And when made tainted and impure by evil, so it's the gateway to the klipot, to the death. Okay, so that's Rav Nosson's proof to what he just said right now. All right? So again, sorry. Ragleha yordot mavet. That's the idea that the access of evil is close to the area of the legs. In context of Yaakov Avinu, where his legs, his descendants, his offspring, the good people trying to hold on and they fall. If it's Gzerat Shmad, if it's whatever, but the idea of the future descendants, that's us. And we're in close proximity to death, when being influenced by Esav, which is sadness and anything foreign. And through him, he's explaining what we said earlier in the verse, through the angel hitting Yaakov in his thigh, Vateka kaf yarech Yaakov. It caused for the thigh of Yaakov to be moved. Vateka, like we said, the three interpretations of Rabbi Berechia, Rabbi Elazar, and Rabbi Nachman there in the Midrash. Shemizah nimshach, that through the hitting of the thigh of Yaakov is drawn the prohibition of the Jewish people to eat the gid hanasheh, the sciatic nerve, right? This is the verse coming up. Where is it? Right over here, sorry. The verse here, see, this verse is verse 26, chapter 32, 26, about the fight of the angel with Yaakov. But tekach of Yaakov, like we said, verse 26. And then, after Yaakov wins him over, and then he forces the angel to give him a bracha, okay? So it says there afterwards in verse 31 that after Yaakov got the bracha and he's limping afterwards, he called the place Peniel because he saw the face of God, the angel. And then it says the sun, because this is all alot hashachar, this is before dawn, so it's still dark outside. And then it says in verse 32, Vayizrach lo hashemesh, and then the sun began to shine on Yaakov, kasher avart Peniel, as he was leaving, passing Peniel, where he had the battle with the angel, and he was still limping. Okay? But then it's afterwards that he was healed. But the next verse, 33, says like this: because of this battle, and because of Yaakov limping, so therefore we have a commandment. Al-ken lo yochlu, verse 33, Al-ken lo yochlu v'nei Yisrael et gid hanasheh, asher al kaf hayarech ad hayom hazeh, ki naga bechaf yarech Yaakov begid hanasheh. Therefore, the Jewish people should not eat gid hanasheh. You begin to wonder, because Yaakov is limping, so we have a commandment to commemorate that. We don't eat from the sciatic nerve. What does that have to do with us? It's him limping. So that shows what we're explaining. Because Yaakov is a symbolism for us, his legs represent us, the offspring and descendants of Yaakov. So therefore there's a commandment relating to us now. Because of what happened, there's something dangerous here. Because the angel found an opening on the legs, that opening is danger zone. Because he has access to that opening, the hip of Yaakov, even though it was healed eventually. But because the angel found an opening to get to Yaakov's descendants, so we have to be careful of that opening. What is that opening? The sciatic nerve. So they're saying, therefore, lo yuchlu b'nei Yisrael et gid hanasheh. Therefore, the children of Israel, that's us, the descendants, we're not allowed to eat of the sciatic nerve, the gid hanasheh, asher al kaf hayarech ad hayom hazeh, which is on the bone, the ladle-shaped bone top of the hip, of the thigh, until today. Why? Because the Torah says clearly, Ki naga, because the angel hit the kaf Yerach Yaakov begidin Hashem, because he hit him there and begidin Hashem. So again, you ask, so what? So what? There's something here. What is Gidin Hashem? Look at the Rav Nosson quotes now from the Zohar. So we look at the Zohar. Let's take a look. It says like this. From now, the hitting of the angel on the thigh, from this is drawn that the Jewish people are not allowed to eat the nerve on the sciatic nerve, which was moved by the hitting of the angel on the ladle-shaped part of the bone of the thigh. Ve'ita. So now it says in the Zohar, an amazing Zohar. Let's take a look at the Zohar. I have a library. I have to open up all the books. Rav Nosson, it's quoting everything, and we got to see inside because he's assuming you know what he's talking about. So the Zohar, Parshat Vayshlach, page 170b. Okay, it says something unbelievable. Okay, let's take a look at this. I'm gonna read it with the Matok Midrash commentary explaining the Zohar.
What page is it?
Page 170b in Bereshit, in Parshat Vayshlach.
Okay.
170b. Okay, and this piece is in a bracket because it's taken from another place in the Zohar, but because it deals with the Parshat Vayshlach about the sciatic nerves, they put the authors of the Zohar put it here. So it says like this. V'amar od, he said also, continuing with his beginning of the Zohar, whoever's speaking in the Zohar, whichever Tana, begin de'it bebarnash ramach shaifin, lekovel ramach pikudin doraita de'inun leme'ebad ityahavu. Let's see the explanation. Levish yesh ba'adam ramach evarim keneged ramach mitzvot haTorah shem nitnu ba'asod kayam, because the man has 248 limbs, which correspond to the 248 mitzvot of the Torah, which were given to the Jews to fulfill. So every limb that we have corresponds to another part of the Torah that we have to fulfill. And the fulfillment of that limb is when the body of that human being fulfills that corresponding mitzvah, namely the Jewish people that were given the Torah. And they also correspond to the 248 angels that the divine presence encloaks itself within these 248 angels. Okay, that's how powerful the human body is. Look at the representation, not to be taken for granted. Ushma di lehon keshma de Marion, ushmam hu keshem ribonam. The names of these angels are like the names of their masters. Wow. Ve'it bebarna shasa gidin, and also a human being has 365 like veins, nerves, gidin, sinews. Ulekivleon shasa pikudin delav inun ityevu lemebad. Ve'esh ba'adam shasa gidim kenegdam shasa mitzvot shelo nitnu lasotam. So the man has, that's 240 limbs to what we can do, and then the 365 gidim, nerves and sinews of the human being, are the mitzvot that we're not allowed to do. In other words, lo taseh. A commandment, don't do this, don't do that, like that, there's 365. V'lakover shasa yom shata, and they correspond to the 365 days of the year, the solar calendar year. Okay? So now, what's Tisha B'Av? What day is Tisha B'Av corresponding to? Which nerve? Look at this. Tisha B'Av chad minehon di'u lakover samech mem. Now Tisha B'Av is one of the 365 days which has a corresponding nerve in the 365 nerves and veins and sinews of the human body. And that one day was given by Hashem to Uncle Sam. We call him Uncle Sam. We can't say his name. Samech Mem Aleph Lamed. Samael. We don't say it. We can write it out. We call him Uncle Sam. Uncle Sam. Okay? Samech Mem. All right? So what is Tisha B'Av? Hine Tisha B'Av hu echad mem hu keneged Samech Mem. That's a day that's given to the evil one, Samech Mem. So it has a corresponding nerve, okay? The iu chad me'inun shasa yomin. So this is explaining first. Shu sholet al echad mishasa yamim. Samech Mem, Uncle Sam, he rules over one of the 365 days. which is which day? V'hainu Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av. That's his day. Ubegin kach amra d'oraita. That's why the Torah says, this first pasuk, Lo yuchlu b'nei Yisrael et gidan Hashem. The Jewish people, the descendants of Israel, are not allowed to eat the sciatic nerve. So the midat et, the, is Aleph Tav. Aleph Tav, the Zohar says, is a Rashi Tevot. It stands for Tisha Av. Backwards, right? Aleph is Av, Tav is Tisha. 9th of Av is hinted to in Et, at least in this verse. Other places that's written Et, you can't derive the same conclusion. Here, though, the Torah points out, is hinted to Tisha Av in Gidan Hashem. So the sciatic nerve, the reason why it's forbidden to eat, because it corresponds to Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av is the day that belongs to the Samech Mem. The angel of Esav, whose also his name is Uncle Sam, his name is Samech Mem, he hit Yaakov specifically on the bone where the sciatic nerve is located, and we pushed away, okay, showing that's his opening to attack the Jews. And the attack, Rav Nosson is amazing now, watch what he's going to do. The attack is sadness and depression, where unnecessary. A person doesn't fight against it. If you don't fight against sadness and depression, so Hashem will give you something to really be sad about. Okay? Watch. This is amazing how it's going to fit in now. So this is the quote, by the way, from the Zohar. Okay, it goes on a little. Let's just maybe go on a little in the Zohar. Right? Like we said, Azga Tisha B'Av de la Achlin Be Vela Shatin. So Tisha B'Av is the day corresponding to the sciatic nerve. Ba'ale Rabot Tisha B'Av she'en ochlin bo velo shotin bo. You're not allowed to eat, not allowed to drink on that day. Levishu keneged hagidan Hashem corresponds to the sciatic nerve. Eating and drinking on that day would give nourishment to the Samech Mem, whose access to the Jewish people is this day. If you eat and drink and give, physical nourishment, which also spiritual nourishment for the human body, that would give automatic nourishment for the evil side, for this Uncle Samuel. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu foresaw this, and this was the hint given to Jacob by the hitting of the angel on the sciatic nerve. Right? Let's go on the Zohar, because it's really, really pertaining to what he's saying here. V'hainu v'ya'avek ishimo. So this is the meaning of, and the man, the angel, was wrestling and also causing dust to go up with Yaakov, with wrestling with Yaakov. Hainu b'chol yomei shata b'chol shayfin Yaakov. He tried, and initially the Uncle Sam, the angel of Esav, nisa lishlot b'chol yomot hashana b'chol evarav shel Yaakov. He tried to overpower all the days of the year, 365, and all the limbs of Yaakov. So the days of Yaakov, that he lives through the 365 days, and the limbs of Yaakov. And his only opening he found, the only opening he found was in the sciatic nerve. Once he got to the sciatic nerve, Yaakov became weakened. He started to limp. He got him on the spot. I found your weak point. So in other words, he was wrestling with the entire corpus of Yaakov. The opening he found to get in to bring him down and attack was the day of the year, not a limb, not 248, but from the 365 sinews corresponding to the days. Which day? Tisha B'Av. He found in. The Beit Takaf Itgazar Dina Ilan Alana. Shebo nitchazek HaSamech Mem v'nigzar din aleinu b'midbar shel yikanes Eretz Yisrael. That's how the Samech Mem had such an overpowering strength, and it was on that day that was decreed upon the Jews in the desert not to enter the land of Israel, because they cried on the night of Tisha B'Av. They cried. He's going to say, Rav Nosson, the crying is the idea of sadness. What did you do to us? You brought us to this land where they eat the people who live there, giants. They accepted the slander of the 10 spies, okay? And all the Jews started to cry for nothing, because Yehoshua and Caleb told the Jews, "Shut up, be quiet, accept. We're gonna make it. We're telling you, don't listen to the slander of the 10 spies. We were there, and we can overpower them. It's all just a twisting of the mind, imagination." And the Jews just went on with their imagination, and they started to cry, "We're doomed, we're finished, you took us out of Egypt to die in the desert." So Hashem said, you're crying for nothing? Crying for nothing is sadness and depression. Because when you really think about it, you have no valid reason to be sad and depressed. You want to give some psychological reasoning, there's lack of dopamine and this and that, okay, but ultimately, it's your choice that brought you to a situation where now you feel like you're depressed and sad. You caused it, okay? You have to be careful. You have to get out. That's why sadness, depression is very dangerous, and a person's punished for it. There's a special Gehinam reserved for people who got depressed and fell into it and got stuck there because of their free choice. It's called the Gehinam of ice. There's a Gehinam of fire, but the Zohar says there's a worse Gehinam of ice for those who gave up due to sadness and depression. Very bad, okay? So the Gemara says, it's Ta'anit, page 29. Hashem says, you cried for nothing. Cried for nothing. So I'll give you an opening to cry for generations to come. And that was the destruction of the first and second temple on Tisha B'Av. And in later times, they say that the Nazi World War II started on Tisha B'Av, 1939. That's when he started to attack World War II, etc. Started on Tisha, the night or day of Tisha B'Av. Okay, so it's a day which is an opening for the Sitra Achra, for the Sitra Achra. Okay, v'itcharav be'makdesha, like the Zohar says, and on that day the temple was destroyed. V'chol man da'achel b'Tisha B'Av kilu achel gidan Hashem. And the Zohar saying something unbelievable. And anybody who eats on Tisha B'Av, it's equivalent to eating the sciatic nerve. So going over the takana of the later sages to eat on Tisha B'Av, it activates as if the person did an actual transgression of a Torah prohibition of not eating the sciatic nerve. Can you believe that? Look at the connection. That's what the Zohar is saying. It's as if he ate from the sciatic nerve. Okay? Let's go back to Rav Nosson now. Rav Nosson takes all of this and presents an unbelievable bouquet. Okay? V'ita shezeh b'chena Tisha B'Av. And it's run down that the Gidan Hashem that we just explained now from Tisha, Aleph Tav, Av, Tisha, the 9th of Av, hinted in that verse. Et Gidan Hashem. So in other words, Et is equivalent to Gidan Hashem. Et, the 9th of Av, is Gidan Hashem. Got it? Okay? Shezeh b'chena Tisha B'Av. Shebo necharav Beit HaMikdash. That's the day that the temple was destroyed, the holy temple. Sheba al yedei hitgarbut habechiya v'ha'atzvut bechinam, which comes through an overpowering of unnecessary crying and sadness. Bivchinat, like it says in Bamidbar, in Parshat Shlach. Let's take a look at Parshat Shlach. I brought all my books here. I'm sorry. Here we go. Parshat Shlach. Parshat Shlach. It says here, chapter 14, verse 1. After the Jews heard the slander of the spies, okay? Vatisa kol ha'edah, vayitnu et kolam. So the whole assembly, which is the Sanhedrin, the chief rabbis, not just the Jewish people, the chief rabbis accepted the slander, and they raised their voice, vayitnu et kolam, and they let forth their crying, the kolam, vayivku ha'am balayla, and as a result of the Sanhedrin raising their voice, screaming like, oh no, and this and that, vayivku ha'am, the nation cried on that night. Balayla, that night. Okay? Right? So here, it says, right, vayivku ha'am balayla hazu, they cried, and it was an unnecessary crying, because the real truth is Hashem told Moshe, the Jews can enter, they're going to win. There's nothing to be afraid about. So therefore, if you're crying, it's unnecessary, because Hashem is telling you you're going to win. So why are you crying? Unnecessary crying. You know it's wrong, and still you're crying. You're still crying, and you're atzvut because of the slander, because of the distorted imagination due to the slander, and that you accepted it. Especially the sages. Who is the responsible? The Sanhedrin. Because the Sanhedrin cracked, it leads to the regular folk to crack, showing you that always when the Jewish leaders begin to fall, that causes the downfall for the rest of the people. Okay? And they all started to cry. Fine. So the Gemara says, Ta'anit 29a, that Hashem says, the Ruach HaKodesh says, what's the wording here? Let's look at the wording of the Gemara. Gemara Ta'anit. Amar Rabba, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabba says name Rabbi Yochanan. Oto halayda, that night that they cried, because it says halayda, balayla hahu, on that night. You know, what do I care what night it is? Because it's a specific night. That night, which was Tisha B'Av, and the Gemara proves it from the timing, that it's 40 days after receiving of the Torah and everything. So it turns out to be on, because of the calculation, they figured it out, that it's 40 days or 49 days after receiving the Torah. You have to look in the Gemara how it works out exactly. So it works out on the 9th of Av. So that night. So it said, Ota Laila Lel Tisha B'Av. It was the night of the Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av. Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu. Kadosh Baruch Hu said about the Jewish people crying that night. Atem bechitem bechia shel chinam. You guys cried for nothing. Ani ekba lachem bechia nadorot. I'll give you something to really cry about for generations to come. Because that's the night that the temples were destroyed. Okay? So Rav Nosson, again, there's something here Rav Nosson is trying to point out. Okay? That atzvut and crying, which are unnecessary, are the opening for the evil to enter. That's where it starts. That's why a person has to work maximum to be b'simcha, because almost 90% of the day, a person is like down and lethargic and sad and everything for nothing. For nothing. He has every reason to be happy right now, but that's why I was saying, this didn't work out, your wife screamed at you, and this, and then your kids are not turning out the way you want them to turn out, and this and that, and just negative, and the reality is, you have so much to be happy about. Thank you, Hashem, I woke up. You don't appreciate it, because you wake up like, okay, and the person's unhappy he should be plutzing out of joy when he puts on his tefillin, but no, the tefillin he's putting on, and in the meantime, he's like worried and depressed about everything he's going through. But you're putting on tefillin, the crown of the king. No, I'm just out of it. You're not working for it. You don't want. At least say you want to be happy. At least say that. No, I go into it. The person has the negativity. It's so easy to get like swifted away with the negative feelings and to just go with the flow. But it's your free will to say this is wrong and to make a statement, to make a mecha'ah, a retort. You know, even if it's not happening, but at least I know this is wrong, and I disagree with this. Even though I'm falling into the trap, but I don't agree with this. At least say that. At least make a statement inside your head of all the negativity just overpowering and taking over your head and everything. Just make some gesture of positivity, of happiness, of simcha. Okay? So that's called bechia chinam. You hear that term? Bechia chinam. A vain, unnecessary crying and sadness. Unnecessary, because you really have what to be happy about, but you choose to go with the flow, with the what's it called, the grain. There's a term in English I forgot to say, the direction of the hairs. You know, they have a direction, so you go with the grain. You go with them. You have a choice though to stop it, and if you can't stop it, at least disagree with it. At least make a statement. Okay. So, you guys cried for nothing, in vain. I will let you now cry for something really to cry about. Because he explains Rav Nosson now. Because now, our only opening, we can't just be happy 24/7. We also have to give time to crying over the destruction of the temple, over our exile, over the death of the tzaddikim. He says, because now that we're in exile, we have to cry on Tisha B'Av. We don't rejoice. You have no right to rejoice. Until Mashiach comes, you have no right to rejoice. I'm sorry to say this. I was by the Kotel on the morning Tisha B'Av, and you have these people who are walking onto the Temple Mount, who are up to where it's allowed, and they're singing and singing. Who gave you permission to sing? Oh, we're in the time of Mashiach. Who gave you permission to sing? Who? Which halachic rabbi goes against Shulchan Aruch? It's Shulchan Aruch. Until Mashiach comes, listen, you have no right to go against Shulchan Aruch. Rabbi Nachman once said, you can twist my teachings, because many of these people, they're the psychedelic, Hasidic, Kabbalistic ideas, and that leads them to make their own conclusions, even against Torah law. Rabbi Nachman once said, you can twist my teachings any way you want, and you start doing mental gymnastics, Kabbalistic gymnastics, spiritual, Hasidic gymnastics, but don't budge from a single paragraph of the Code of Jewish Law. He gave rules. You have to be grounded. You want to go flying and everything? Right, bravo, great, kol hakavod, go flying. can take your ideas and everything. But once you start going against Shulchan Aruch, you know you're on the wrong track. You know something's wrong here. You know, I can do this and that. And these people, they start thinking, no, it's time Mashiach and this. That was the downfall. All these people who thought earlier the time of Mashiach, and then they had a major downfall. So people are repeating it again. They go against Shulchan Aruch. Don't go against Shulchan Aruch. We have to be, there's a time to be mourning. So you guys say, but you guys are sad all the year round. Oh, so you're sad all the year round. That's your justification why not to be sad in Tisha B'Av. So switch it. Don't be sad all the year round and be sad or opening to have brokenness on Tisha B'Av, to mourn on Tisha B'Av. Who told you to be sad and mourning the whole year round? There's no mitzvah. Oh, you're already like that? Oh, because I'm already like that, so it's more dangerous if I got Tisha B'Av. No, you got to switch it. You got to work on being happy all year round. And that way, when it comes Tisha B'Av, you put in all your heart to express the pain that you're going through. And you can do it now properly because all year round, you're working on being besimcha. So then what happens, then you have an opening for the pain released at the right time. And not like the majority of people, it's all year round. So therefore, when Tisha B'Av, oh, it's too much for me now. What do you want? You're all year round being sad and not doing anything about it. So when it comes to Tisha B'Av, you feel you want to, it's like a trauma, I have to run away from it. No, you got to work on being besimcha. And if you work on besimcha, you take these opportunities that come during the year, like Tisha B'Av, and like midnight, every day at midnight, to get up at midnight, if you can, and mourn over the destruction of the temple, to feel the loss. Not to be sad, but to feel the loss. So Rav Nosson saying, Ki ata tzechin livkot. Rav Nosson doesn't say we have to be sad. Therefore, because of what the Gemara says, Hashem says, you cried for nothing, so now I'll give you what to cry about. So now, we have to cry, Rav Nosson says, on Tisha B'Av, and at midnight every normal, regular night, at halachic midnight, chatzot, al churban Beit HaMikdash, on the destruction of the temple, kedei lamtika din b'shorsho. Why do we cry? To mitigate the judgment caused by the sciatic nerve hitting of the angel of Uncle Sam. L'takena bechia v'atzvut, in order to fix the crying and sadness which were in vain of the Jewish people. So if I see Rav Nosson explaining the Gemara, Hashem says you guys cried for nothing. So when you read it, when you hear the Gemara on a simple level, it's like, oh, so Hashem is punishing us. Hashem said, oh, you guys cried for nothing. So now you will cry really for something for generations. So Rav Nosson's rereading the Gemara. You guys cried for nothing. So how are we going to fix this now? So now you have, by the crying for the upcoming generation, the Dorot, the future offspring of Yaakov, will have to cry to mitigate the crying of nothing of the Jews in the desert on the night of Tisha B'Av, due to the opening of the Gida Nasheh hit by the angel on Yaakov. So now, how do we fix that? It's like a punishment. Oh, you do something bad, it's going to hit you. That's not the Gemara. Hashem is saying in the Gemara, you guys cried, crying for nothing. So therefore, to fix it, there has to be a Bechia Ledorot for the generations to come. They have to cry, but at the right time to mitigate. What's the right? In other words, even as damaging as the Gida Nasha is, that it's a day given to the Samech Mem, still we can mitigate it if we. You see, the Zohar said, if you eat and drink, which means to be happy on Tisha B'Av, it's dangerous, it's damaging. Eating and drinking on Tisha B'Av will give power to the evil side. So then what do I do on Tisha B'Av not to give power to their side? Mourn and cry. That way he can't touch you. He says, I got you crying and mourning, so therefore there's nothing here to take from you. You're crying and mourning, I'm not interested in stealing from you because there's nothing to steal because you're crying and mourning. That's how we fix it though. Crying and mourning at the right time. What's the right time? On Tisha B'Av, and not the rest of the year like people are, unfortunately. And at midnight. You get up at midnight, take that opportunity in the quietness of the dark of the middle of the night to open your heart to Hashem. Hashem, we're lost in the darkness. There's no Beit HaMikdash, etc. Okay? So, אתה צריך לבכות בתשעה באב ובחצות לילה על חורבן בית המקדש כדי להמתיק הדין בשורשו, in order to rectify, to mitigate, sweeten the judgment, the din at its root. לתקן הבכייה והעצבות הנזכר לאל, to fix the crying and sadness which was for nothing, mentioned above. We should elu nefashot, and it was for the sake of these souls, us, the upcoming generations, Shem Yotzei Yerecho She Yaakov, who we are, the offspring from the loins, the legs of Yaakov, For their sake, lacham imo Yaakov harbe. Yaakov kept on fighting. Like he could have, Yaakov also just left the angel, but he chose to fight. It says vayavek ish imo. By the wording, and the man wrestled with him, it shows that Yaakov was interested in wrestling with him, because it's equating, just like Uncle Sam wanted to wrestle with Yaakov. The verse says, and a man wrestled with him. Instead of saying with Yaakov, or attacking him, in another version of the verse of writing it, it says imo, together with him, meaning Yaakov was just as much eager to bring down Uncle Sam, the angel of Esav. Why? Because he saw he was doing it for our sake. He said, I'm not going to let him attack my offspring, so I'm trying to bring him down. Okay, we'll stop here. This is pretty amazing, heavy duty stuff. Bezat Hashem, to be continued hopefully in the next class. Bezat Hashem. Okay, thank you for joining.
Thanks, Rabbi. Yeshach.
Mamash, amazing. Rav Nosson is amazing. All right, brother. Chazak.